On September 15th, 2021, Flight 447 departed Miami International Airport at 1:15 in the afternoon, bound for Chicago O'Hare. The Boeing 737 carried a full passenger load for what should have been a routine 2.5-hour domestic flight. After the arrival, when investigators examined the documentation, they discovered something that challenged every principle of linear time progression. According to official airport records, luggage manifests, and ground crew reports, Flight 447 had completed its landing sequence at Chicago O'Hare at exactly 3:42 in the afternoon on September 14th. The aircraft had somehow arrived at its destination a full 24 hours before departing from its origin point. The flight attendant working the cabin that day remembered the journey as completely routine. Passengers had boarded normally, safety demonstrations proceeded without incident, and beverage service was completed during the standard approach phase. Yet when she checked her mobile device after deplaning, the date display showed September 14th, despite her clear recollection of beginning work on the 15th. Her personal calendar, work schedule, and even her apartment lease agreement all indicated she had reported for duty on September 15th as planned. Ground crew supervisor Dennis Walsh documented the aircraft's arrival in his official shift report, noting passenger deplaning procedures and baggage unloading operations as occurring on September 14th. His detailed logs included specific gate assignments, fuel service records, and maintenance checks that were completed according to standard protocols. But Walsh maintained that he had worked an entirely different flight at that gate on the 14th, serving a different aircraft with different passengers and crew members. The aircraft's internal computer systems provided the most disturbing evidence of temporal displacement. Black box recordings, navigation logs, and automated maintenance reports all contained timestamps indicating the entire flight had occurred on September 14th. Every altitude reading, every radio transmission, and every system diagnostic was logged as happening exactly 24 hours before the aircraft had actually taken off from Miami. The onboard computers had somehow recorded a complete flight sequence that preceded the flight's actual occurrence. Passenger documentation created another layer of impossibility. Cell phone metadata analysis revealed that every photograph taken during the flight, every text message sent, and every social media post shared was time-stamped September 14th. One passenger had uploaded a window seat selfie with the caption describing her anticipation for a job interview the following day, but her interview was scheduled for September 15th, the date she remembered boarding the aircraft in Miami. Air traffic control supervisor Thomas Rodriguez made the most unsettling discovery while reviewing radar tracking data from the flight. For exactly 37 minutes during the aircraft's journey, their monitoring systems displayed something that violated every principle of physics and aviation safety. Flight 447 appeared simultaneously in two distinct locations. Primary radar tracked the aircraft following its normal flight path from Miami towards Chicago, while secondary systems detected the same aircraft already parked at the arrival gate, with passengers actively deplaning. The 37-minute overlap corresponded precisely with the final approach and landing sequence timing. During those critical minutes, reality appeared to split into parallel tracks. The aircraft existed in both states simultaneously, completing its journey while having already completed it in a previous temporal iteration. Rodriguez had supervised air traffic operations for over 20 years and had never encountered anything resembling this type of systematic failure across multiple independent monitoring systems. The radar signatures themselves showed no indication of equipment malfunction or data corruption. Two separate tracking systems operating on different frequencies had recorded identical impossible readings with perfect clarity and precision. The aircraft's transponder signal was clean and consistent throughout both timeline sequences, suggesting that the anomaly existed in the nature of the event itself, rather than in the recording equipment. investigation into the aircraft's maintenance history revealed no previous incidents of temporal displacement or chronometer malfunctions. The Boeing 737 had been in service for 8 years, with an exemplary safety record and routine maintenance compliance. Its navigation systems, communication equipment, and flight management computers had all passed comprehensive inspections within the previous month. No technical explanation could account for the systematic timestamp errors across multiple independent systems. The Federal Aviation Administration launched a comprehensive investigation that included interviews with all passengers and crew members, analysis of air traffic control recordings, and examination of airport surveillance footage. Every witness provided consistent accounts of a normal flight experience occurring on September 15th. Yet every piece of technical documentation indicated the flight had somehow occurred on September 14th, creating an irreconcilable contradiction between human memory and recorded evidence. The investigation's final report acknowledged the temporal discrepancies, but offered no explanation for how an aircraft could complete its destination arrival before beginning its origin departure. The case was classified as an unexplained incident and removed from standard aviation safety databases to prevent confusion among industry professionals. But the evidence remains, documented across multiple systems and witnessed by dozens of individuals who experienced time itself behaving in ways that conventional physics insists are impossible. This aviation incident represents just the beginning of a pattern that extends far beyond transportation anomalies. The next case involves a different type of displacement that affects not just timing, but the fundamental ownership of physical reality itself. What happens when someone returns home to discover that their house legally belongs to strangers who have proper documentation, proving they purchased the property months earlier? The answer reveals another crack in the stability of our timeline that suggests reality undergoes periodic adjustments that rewrite history while leaving fragments of previous versions intact. Sarah Mitchell returned from a weekend camping expedition in the mountains to discover that her entire existence had been systematically erased from official records. The house she had owned and maintained for 8 years now belonged to complete strangers who possessed legitimate documentation, proving they had purchased the property months earlier. These weren't squatters or fraudulent occupants. David and Linda Carmichael were inside what Sarah considered her home, unpacking personal belongings and arranging furniture in rooms she had personally painted and decorated. The Carmichaels presented a signed deed, comprehensive mortgage paperwork, and valid homeowners' insurance policies, all bearing their names. Bank records demonstrated they had been making regular monthly payments since February. It was now October. Sarah's house keys still functioned perfectly in the front door, which created confusion for everyone involved. The new owners had never changed the locks because, according to their documentation, Sarah had voluntarily sold them the house and relocated in January. But Sarah possessed absolutely no memory of any real estate transaction, any interaction with these people, or any decision to sell her property. The neighborhood corroborated the Carmichaels' version of events completely. Mrs. Henderson from the adjacent house remembered helping Linda plant seasonal flowers in the front garden during March. The Postal Service confirmed they had been delivering mail to the Carmichael address since spring. Even the local grocery store had David's information in their customer database, with home delivery records extending back 7 months. Every aspect of the community's collective memory supported the idea that the Carmichaels had been legitimate residents for most of the year. But inside the house, Sarah discovered evidence that suggested reality had experienced some form of systematic malfunction. In the kitchen junk drawer, underneath takeout menus and miscellaneous household items, she found her own mail, electric company bills, credit card statements, and magazine subscription renewals were all addressed to Sarah Mitchell at that exact address. The disturbing detail was that every piece of correspondence bore dates that hadn't occurred yet. The future-dated mail suggested something extraordinary had happened. Sarah hadn't simply shifted into a timeline where she had sold her house earlier than remembered. She had somehow moved into a reality where her personal belongings and financial records hadn't properly synchronized with the new historical sequence. Real estate agent Patricia Wong had allegedly facilitated the sale, though she maintained no recollection of Sarah or the transaction. Her professional files contained a complete sales record, including Sarah's signature on documents she insisted she had never seen before. Handwriting analysis performed by certified experts confirmed the signature was definitely authentic, written in Sarah's distinctive style with proper pressure patterns and letter formation. But Sarah had absolutely no memory of meeting Wong or discussing any aspect of selling her home. The most unsettling discovery emerged when Sarah examined her bank account history. 8 months of mortgage payments were completely absent from her transaction records. The money had never left her account because in this timeline, she hadn't owned the house during those months. But her savings balance remained exactly as expected, as if the missing mortgage payments had been redirected to some alternative financial destination that existed outside normal banking systems. Sarah's situation represents a specific type of temporal displacement, where personal history gets rewritten, while fragments of previous timeline iterations remain embedded in the new reality. The future-dated mail suggests that timeline adjustments don't occur instantaneously across all systems. Instead, certain elements lag behind during the transition process, creating temporary contradictions between old and new versions of events. Documentation from the county recorder's office showed the property transfer had been processed according to standard legal procedures. Title insurance companies had verified clear ownership history. Property tax records reflected the change in ownership with appropriate adjustments to billing addresses and payment responsibilities. Every official system had been updated to reflect the Carmichaels' legitimate purchase. Yet Sarah's personal items and correspondence remained scattered throughout the house, as if she had never left. The case attracted attention from legal scholars who specialize in property disputes because it presented circumstances that existing law couldn't address adequately. How do courts resolve ownership conflicts when both parties possess valid documentation supporting their claims? Sarah's deed was authentic and properly recorded. The Carmichaels' deed was equally valid, with a clear chain of title. Both parties had legitimate grounds for claiming legal ownership of the same property, creating a paradox that challenged fundamental principles of real estate law. Investigation into the timeline discrepancy revealed that other residents in the neighborhood had experienced minor memory inconsistencies during the same period. Several people recalled interactions with Sarah that supposedly occurred after she had moved away. The mail carrier remembered delivering packages to Sarah's address in June, despite postal records showing only Carmichael deliveries during that month. Local shop owners had clear recollections of serving Sarah throughout the summer, though their sales records contained no transactions under her name. These supporting memory fragments suggest that Sarah's displacement wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a broader temporal adjustment that affected multiple people's recollections of events. The neighborhood's collective memory contained elements from both timeline versions, creating a hybrid reality where some people remembered Sarah's continued residence, while official records documented her absence. The resolution came when investigators discovered that Sarah had been experiencing what researchers now term timeline lag. Her consciousness had retained memories from a previous temporal iteration, while her physical circumstances had been updated to match a new historical sequence. The future-dated mail represented evidence that the transition process was still incomplete, with certain systems requiring additional time to fully synchronize with the adjusted timeline. Sarah eventually accepted the situation and relocated to a different address, but she retained copies of the future-dated mail as evidence of her experience. The Carmichaels remained in the house and gradually replaced the remaining traces of Sarah's previous occupancy. But the case established an important precedent for understanding how timeline resets affect individual lives and property ownership in ways that existing legal frameworks cannot adequately address. The implications of Sarah's experience extend beyond real estate disputes into questions about the nature of personal identity and historical continuity. If someone's entire living situation can be retroactively altered while they retain memories of the previous arrangement, then individual biography becomes fundamentally unreliable as a record of actual events. The next case we'll examine involves an educational institution where hundreds of students and faculty members remembered experiencing a complete week of school activities that, according to official records, never occurred at all. Roosevelt Middle School in Phoenix became the epicenter of a temporal mystery that challenged everything educators understood about institutional memory and academic continuity. On what students and faculty believed was Wednesday morning, October 13th, 847 students arrived for classes expecting to continue their normal weekly routine. They carried completed homework assignments, discussed upcoming tests, and referenced lessons they clearly remembered from earlier in the week. But according to the school district's official attendance system and administrative records, it was actually Thursday, October 7th. The discrepancy wasn't a simple calendar confusion or clerical error. Every person in the building possessed detailed memories of 5 complete school days that the institution's documentation insisted had never occurred. 7th grade student Marcus Thompson arrived with his completed science project on volcanic geology, an assignment he believed was due that Wednesday. His notebook contained extensive research notes, carefully drawn diagrams, and detailed observations from what he remembered as Mr. Rodriguez's lectures on tectonic activity. When Marcus submitted his project, his teacher expressed confusion because the volcanic geology unit wasn't scheduled to begin for another week. The curriculum timeline showed they were still covering basic earth science fundamentals. The most disturbing aspect was that Marcus's notebook contained information that Mr. Rodriguez claimed he hadn't taught yet. The notes included specific terminology, scientific concepts, and experimental procedures that matched the planned volcanic geology curriculum exactly. Marcus had somehow acquired knowledge from lessons that, according to the official schedule, hadn't been delivered to students. Principal Catherine Walsh discovered the temporal displacement when she attempted to review the previous week's security footage for an unrelated incident investigation. The surveillance system showed completely empty hallways, vacant classrooms, and deserted parking lots from October 8th through October 12th. The school building appeared abandoned during what everyone remembered as 5 days of normal educational activities. Motion sensors had detected no human presence. Automated lighting systems had remained inactive, and climate control equipment had operated in weekend mode throughout the supposedly active school week. The automated attendance tracking system presented equally impossible data. Digital records showed 0 student presence during the missing week, with no login attempts at computer terminals, no cafeteria purchases, and no library book checkouts. Yet teachers possessed clear recollections of taking daily attendance, conducting lessons, and grading assignments. English instructor Dorothy Kim remembered assigning a creative writing exercise about time travel, which several students claimed to have completed and submitted. The essays were nowhere to be found in her gradebook system, but multiple students could recite specific passages from their compositions. 8th grade student Jessica Wong had taken photographs during what she remembered as Tuesday lunch period, October 11th. The digital images showed her classmates eating in the cafeteria with the school's daily menu board clearly visible in the background. When administrators contacted the food service company, they discovered that no meals had been prepared or delivered to Roosevelt Middle School during the entire week in question. The cafeteria had been officially closed for equipment maintenance that the staff somehow didn't remember performing. Student textbooks and assignment folders contained evidence that contradicted the official curriculum timeline. History students had completed notes from a lesson about the Cuban Missile Crisis that instructor Robert Chen insisted he hadn't taught yet. Mathematics students had worked through practice problems from Chapter 7, but the class had only progressed through Chapter 5 according to lesson planning documentation. Art students displayed completed projects that required techniques and materials they supposedly hadn't been introduced to yet. Custodial supervisor Michael Torres remembered his usual routine of cleaning classrooms, emptying waste containers, and restocking supplies throughout the missing week. He could describe exactly which rooms had required extra attention, which teachers had stayed late for preparation work, and which vending machines had needed maintenance. His detailed recollections included specific conversations with faculty members and observations about student behavior patterns. But his employment records showed he had taken scheduled vacation days during that entire period, with substitute custodial staff handling building maintenance duties. The school's computer network logs revealed another layer of impossibility. Student login records showed no activity during the missing week, despite clear memories of using computers for research projects and online assignments. The network monitoring system had detected no data traffic, no file downloads, and no email communications during school hours. Yet students possessed detailed memories of completing internet-based research, submitting digital assignments, and participating in online educational activities. Faculty meeting minutes provided additional evidence of the temporal discrepancy. Teachers remembered attending their regular Wednesday staff meeting on October 12th, discussing student progress and reviewing upcoming curriculum changes. Several educators had taken detailed notes during the meeting and could recall specific policy discussions and administrative announcements. But the official meeting schedule showed no faculty gathering during that week, and conference room reservation systems had recorded no bookings. The missing week phenomenon extended beyond Roosevelt Middle School to affect some students' family members and community connections. Parents reported receiving automated phone calls about their children's attendance and academic performance during the week that officially didn't exist. Some families had attended parent-teacher conferences that weren't listed in the school's appointment system. Local businesses remembered students visiting during lunch periods and after school hours, despite the building being officially closed. Investigation into the school district's central database revealed that Roosevelt Middle School's records had somehow become isolated from the main administrative network during the missing week. Data synchronization logs showed that the school's internal systems had been operating independently, generating attendance reports, grade entries, and scheduling updates that never transmitted to district headquarters. When connectivity was restored, the accumulated data from the missing week was automatically purged as corrupted information. The temporal displacement affected different individuals with varying degrees of intensity. Some students and faculty members retained vivid memories of every detail from the missing week, while others experienced only fragmentary recollections of specific events or conversations. A few people had no memory of the disputed time period at all, creating a spectrum of temporal awareness within the same educational community. Psychological evaluation of affected individuals revealed no signs of shared delusion or mass hysteria. Memory assessments confirmed that people's recollections were internally consistent and contained details that couldn't have been fabricated independently by hundreds of different people. The memories included sensory information, emotional responses, and social interactions that demonstrated authentic psychological characteristics of real experiences. The Roosevelt Middle School incident established that temporal anomalies could affect large groups simultaneously while leaving physical evidence of the displacement embedded in institutional systems. The case demonstrated that timeline resets don't necessarily erase all traces of previous iterations, particularly when human consciousness retains information that contradicts updated official records. Educational researchers studying the incident noted that the missing week contained curriculum advancement that aligned perfectly with planned learning objectives. Students had somehow acquired knowledge and completed assignments that matched their academic schedule, suggesting that the educational process had continued normally within an alternative temporal framework. The learning outcomes were legitimate and measurable, even though the instructional time had been officially erased from institutional memory. The long-term effects of the missing week continued to influence Roosevelt Middle School for months afterward. Students frequently referenced lessons and experiences from the disputed time period, creating ongoing confusion for teachers who had no memory of delivering that instruction. Academic assessments revealed that students possessed knowledge they shouldn't have acquired yet, forcing curriculum adjustments to accommodate their advanced understanding. The case attracted attention from temporal researchers who recognized it as evidence that large-scale timeline adjustments could occur while preserving certain elements of human experience and institutional function. The missing week represented a controlled example of how reality could be systematically modified while leaving educational and social processes intact within an alternative temporal framework. Documentation of the Roosevelt Middle School anomaly contributed to growing awareness that timeline stability might be far more fragile than previously assumed. Educational institutions, with their structured schedules and detailed record-keeping systems, provide ideal environments for detecting temporal discrepancies that might otherwise go unnoticed in less organized settings. The next anomaly involves transportation infrastructure and reveals how timeline resets can affect entire transit systems while creating paradoxical situations where travelers become trapped in temporal loops that repeat specific segments of their journey indefinitely. This case demonstrates that time itself can malfunction on a localized scale, affecting individual vehicles and their occupants while leaving surrounding reality unchanged. Jake Morrison and Tyler Chen were driving home from a late-night concert on State Route 89, a familiar stretch of desert highway they had traveled countless times over the years. The road connected their college town to the music venue, a journey that typically took 45 minutes through relatively empty countryside. What began as a routine midnight drive transformed into an encounter with temporal mechanics that defied every principle of linear progression. The anomaly began at mile marker 47 when their vehicle's GPS navigation system announced they should continue straight for 2.3 miles. 4 minutes later, they passed mile marker 49 and heard the identical announcement repeated with precise timing and inflection. The road appeared exactly the same, featuring a distinctive piece of roadside debris and a twisted cactus with an unusual branching pattern that they both recognized from their initial passage. Tyler first noticed their dashboard clock exhibiting impossible behavior. Instead of advancing normally, the digital display would reach 12:47 a.m., then immediately reset to 12:43 a.m., beginning the exact same 4-minute cycle repeatedly. The fuel gauge remained frozen at 3/4 full. The odometer stopped advancing. Their mobile phones showed identical signal strength readings loop after loop, as if they were traveling through the same cellular coverage area indefinitely. The traffic patterns created the most unnerving aspect of their temporal imprisonment. Every cycle featured identical vehicles in precisely the same positions with mechanical timing that resembled a choreographed performance. A red pickup truck would overtake them at exactly the 2-minute mark. An 18-wheeler would appear in their rearview mirror 30 seconds later. A motorcycle would accelerate past them on the left at minute 3:45. The sequence never varied by even a few seconds. Jake decided to test the phenomenon by creating disruptions to see if they could break the pattern. He began honking his horn at specific intervals during each repetition, creating loud sounds that should have attracted attention from other drivers. The surrounding traffic showed absolutely no reaction to the noise, maintaining their scripted movements exactly as programmed. Other vehicles continued their predetermined paths, as if Jake and Tyler existed in a separate reality that couldn't interact with the repeated sequence. Tyler attempted to document their situation using his phone's voice recording function. Each loop, he would describe their location, timestamp their position, and express their growing confusion about the temporal trap. When they eventually escaped the anomaly and examined Tyler's device, they discovered something that challenged everything they understood about cause and effect. 6 separate voice recordings existed, each exactly 4 minutes in duration, containing their conversations from different loops. The recordings weren't identical duplicates of the same conversation. Subtle variations existed between versions, like alternate takes of the same basic dialogue. In recording number 3, Jake mentioned feeling dizzy from the repetition. In recording number 5, he complained about hunger instead. Tyler's voice carried different emotional tones across the various recordings, suggesting that multiple iterations of their conversation had somehow occurred simultaneously within the temporal loop. The mechanical precision of the repeated sequence suggested they were experiencing something more complex than simple temporal displacement. The traffic patterns, road conditions, and environmental factors remained absolutely consistent across dozens of repetitions. Even weather conditions stayed frozen, with the same cloud formations visible in identical positions throughout their imprisonment. It was as if they had become trapped within a recording of reality that played continuously without variation. Their escape from the temporal loop occurred as suddenly as their initial entrapment. At mile marker 49, instead of jumping backward to 47, they continued forward normally. The dashboard clock resumed proper advancement. The odometer began tracking distance again. Familiar landmarks from their hometown appeared ahead, indicating they had somehow traversed the remainder of their journey without conscious awareness of the transition. When they calculated their total travel time from the concert venue to their destination, they discovered they had lost approximately 2.5 hours that felt like only 30 minutes of conscious experience. Their memories contained clear recollection of perhaps a dozen loop repetitions. But the mathematical impossibility suggested they had experienced far more cycles than their consciousness could process or retain. The temporal loop incident demonstrated that localized time distortions could affect individual travelers while leaving surrounding reality undisturbed. Highway patrol officers confirmed that no other drivers had reported unusual experiences on State Route 89 during that time period. Traffic monitoring systems showed normal flow patterns throughout the night, with no indication that any vehicles had become trapped in repetitive sequences. Analysis of their vehicles' onboard computer systems revealed data corruption during the time period corresponding to their temporal imprisonment. GPS logs showed fragmentary positioning data that couldn't be reconciled with standard satellite navigation protocols. The engine management system had recorded fuel consumption rates that didn't match actual usage, suggesting the vehicle had somehow operated outside normal mechanical parameters during the loop sequence. The case attracted attention from transportation safety researchers who were investigating reports of similar incidents on remote highway segments across the southwestern United States. Several drivers had reported experiencing repetitive road sequences that seemed to replay indefinitely before suddenly resuming normal travel. The consistent location patterns suggested that certain geographical areas might be susceptible to temporal distortions that affect vehicular travel specifically. Jake and Tyler's experience provided the most detailed documentation of a transportation-related time loop, because they had been prepared to observe and record their circumstances. Most drivers who encounter similar phenomena dismiss the experience as fatigue-related hallucination or navigation system malfunction. Their deliberate testing and recording efforts created valuable evidence that localized temporal anomalies could trap travelers in repetitive sequences while maintaining the illusion of forward progress. The next anomaly involves electromagnetic communications and demonstrates how information from future events can sometimes reach present-day receivers through radio transmission systems. This case reveals that timeline instability might allow certain types of data to leak backward through temporal barriers, providing advance warning of events that haven't officially occurred yet. Amateur radio operator Patricia Valdez was conducting routine frequency scanning from her home station in Denver when she intercepted a distress transmission that challenged everything she understood about the relationship between cause and effect. The signal originated from South America with clear station identification and detailed emergency information about a volcanic eruption that, according to geological monitoring systems, hadn't happened yet. The transmission came through on 1430 MHz at 11:23 p.m. Mountain Time, featuring station identifier LU4A requesting international emergency assistance. The operator reported catastrophic volcanic activity at Mount Chillon in Argentina, with pyroclastic flows threatening the town of Elshan. Specific details included wind direction data, ash cloud altitude measurements, and evacuation routes being utilized by approximately 1,200 residents. Patricia immediately contacted emergency services to report the disaster, but officials found no evidence of volcanic activity anywhere in Argentina. Geological monitoring stations throughout South America showed normal seismic readings. Mount Chillon, while classified as an active volcano, displayed no signs of impending eruption according to international monitoring networks that maintained real-time surveillance of the region. The emergency transmission lasted exactly 17 minutes and included comprehensive damage assessments that suggested the reporting operator had direct observation access to the volcanic event. The broadcast described collapsed buildings on Avenida San Martin, blocked highways preventing emergency vehicle access, and coordination efforts with Chilean rescue teams for cross-border evacuation procedures. Patricia recorded every word, creating permanent documentation of an event that hadn't occurred. 48 hours later, Mount Chillon erupted with timing and characteristics that matched the advanced transmission with surgical precision. Pyroclastic flows followed identical paths described in the mysterious broadcast. Wind patterns matched perfectly, pushing ash clouds in directions that had been accurately predicted. Evacuation procedures proceeded exactly as outlined in Patricia's recording, with emergency responders utilizing routes and protocols that aligned with information from the future transmission. The specific building collapses on Avenida San Martin occurred precisely as described in the advance warning. Infrastructure damage, casualty estimates, and resource requirements all matched predictions that had been received 2 days before the actual event. Even minor details like temporary shelter locations and supply distribution points corresponded exactly with information from the temporal transmission. Analysis of Patricia's recording revealed embedded elements that shouldn't have existed within a live emergency broadcast. Interwoven with the disaster reports were snippets of news coverage describing the eruption's aftermath. Radio stations from Buenos Aires, Santiago, and São Paulo provided casualty figures, economic impact assessments, and government response evaluations that could only have been compiled hours after the volcanic event concluded. These news segments weren't atmospheric interference or signal bleeding from other transmissions. They were integrated seamlessly into the emergency broadcast, as if the original operator was monitoring multiple information sources simultaneously while requesting assistance. Patricia could hear reporters describing rescue operations, international aid coordination, and damage surveys that wouldn't occur until the eruption was completely finished. Geological expert Dr. Maria Santos examined the technical content of the advanced transmission and confirmed that every scientific detail was accurate. Ash cloud composition, gas emission measurements, and lava flow temperatures all matched post-eruption data collected by monitoring equipment. The mysterious radio operator possessed knowledge that required sophisticated instrumentation and direct access to volcanic monitoring systems during active eruption conditions. The transmission contained timestamps that created a fundamental paradox in temporal mechanics. Patricia's recording was made at 11:23 p.m. on March 8th, documenting an eruption described as currently in progress. But embedded news broadcasts within the same transmission referenced events occurring on March 10th and 11th, up to 60 hours after Patricia had received the original signal. The chronological impossibility suggested that information from multiple future time points had somehow reached her radio equipment simultaneously. Verification efforts by international emergency services confirmed that station identifier LU4A corresponded to a legitimate amateur radio operator in Argentina. However, when contacted, the operator insisted he had never transmitted emergency broadcasts and had been away from his equipment during the reported transmission time. His station logs showed no activity during the period when Patricia received the volcanic eruption warning. These 10 documented anomalies represent more than isolated incidents of temporal displacement. They form a pattern of evidence that challenges our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality itself. From commercial aircraft arriving before departure to entire communities experiencing weeks that never officially occurred, each case demonstrates that time operates according to principles far more complex and unstable than conventional science acknowledges. What makes these incidents particularly disturbing isn't their individual impossibility, but their collective consistency. Across different continents, involving separate institutions and unrelated individuals, the same types of temporal fractures continue emerging. Flight logs contradict passenger memories. Property ownership rewrites itself while leaving fragments of previous histories intact. Educational systems lose entire weeks while students retain knowledge they shouldn't possess yet. Transportation networks trap travelers in repetitive loops that exist outside normal space-time progression. The evidence suggests we're witnessing systematic malfunctions in whatever mechanism maintains temporal continuity. Whether these resets occur naturally through quantum fluctuations or artificially through technologies beyond public knowledge, their existence implies that human experience unfolds within a framework that's far less stable than we assume. Our memories, our records, and our understanding of historical sequence may all be subject to retroactive modification in ways that leave only fragmentary evidence of previous iterations. Perhaps most unsettling is the realization that if timeline resets occur regularly, we would have no reliable method for detecting them unless fragments of evidence survive the transition process. How many of our personal memories contradict official records because those records have been updated while our consciousness retained information from alternative temporal sequences? How often do we experience deja vu, inexplicable knowledge, or memories that don't align with documented events because we're remembering experiences from timelines that have been systematically erased? The implications extend beyond philosophical speculation into practical concerns about the reliability of human knowledge itself. If reality undergoes periodic adjustments that modify historical sequences while preserving certain elements of previous iterations, then every aspect of recorded civilization becomes questionable. Scientific data, legal documentation, personal relationships, and individual identity all exist within a temporal framework that appears far more fluid and manipulable than anyone wants to acknowledge publicly. These cases force us to confront the possibility that what we call reality might be nothing more than the current iteration of an ongoing process that continuously rewrites itself to maintain some form of cosmic balance or correct accumulating errors in the timeline. The fragments of evidence that survive these resets represent glimpses of alternative histories, where events unfolded differently before being systematically updated to match new sequences. The question isn't whether timeline resets occur, but how frequently they happen and what forces control them. The documented evidence proves that temporal mechanics operate according to rules that conventional physics cannot explain. Whether we're dealing with natural quantum processes, advanced technological intervention, or something even more extraordinary, the stability of our timeline appears far more precarious than anyone in positions of authority is willing to admit. These 10 anomalies may represent just the visible surface of a phenomenon that affects reality on scales we can't comprehend. The next time you experience a memory that doesn't match official records, encounter documentation that contradicts your personal timeline, or witness events that seem impossible according to conventional physics, consider the possibility that you're observing evidence of temporal instability that most people dismiss as simple confusion or measurement error. The evidence is there for anyone willing to examine it objectively. Our timeline has been reset before, and it will be reset again.